The Democratic Republic of Congo awaits announcement of final presidential result. 5 suspects arraigned in court following Tuesday's terror attack in Kenya. And Chinese President Special Envoy Yang Jiechi visits Cameroon in his continuing Africa tour. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. The details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Ramanyang with the day's business headlines.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up a little later in the hour. Zimbabwe's inflation rate hits 42% in December. And Safaricom's overdraft service exceeds expectations with 1 million users in the first week of operations. The details on those stories and lots more coming up for you in the next 60 minutes. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we begin in the DRC, where the Democratic Republic of Congo has rejected a demand by the African Union to delay announcing final results from its presidential election. The African Union has raised concern over the manner that the election was held and plans to dispatch a high-level delegation to find a way out of the crisis. But in a statement, the DRC government spokesman Lambert Mende said he does not think anyone has the right to tell the courts what to do. He further says that he is not under the impression that the African Union fully understands Congo's judicial process. Runner-up Martin Fayulu has demanded a recount in his appeal. He's alleging fraud and is citing evidence suggesting he won by a landslide.
However, although the situation on the ground has generally remained calm, it remains a big worry. To put it bluntly, serious doubts about the integrity of the results continue to persist in the minds of the Congolese and their brothers and friends around the world.
Because everyone was expecting it to be done today, but they didn't. They didn't give a specific date. I spoke to a lawyer of Mr. Martin, all its internal issues without any external support. And that is exactly what they're saying right now. They're saying, look, the AU is not competent enough to declare issues, to talk about issues of violence in their country. They have a security force that is on top of the situation. And that's what the DRC government has always been saying. They don't want any external interference in their relations here.
So, Chris, as of now, is the presidential inauguration still on course for the 22nd of January?
I can't say it for sure because the DRC has had very many postponements right from the time that the election was held, and there are clear indications that they may push the date further. So we can't. No one is really sure. It's only the powers that be who know exactly when things will play out. But for now, we just have to wait and see when they'll announce the final date for inauguration.
Right, Chris Ochemringa on the line there from Kinshasa. Well, also following these developments is CGTN's Girum Chala from the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Girum, so what course of action does the African Union have should the DRC proceed to announce the results against the African Union's advice?
Well, Beatrice, the African Union has a jurisdiction to intervene when there is a need. For example, according to its Charter on Democracy Elections, the African Union can assess the situation in a member state and also suggest ways of mitigating a possible problem in the future. As in the case of DRC, for example, the African Union is feeling that if the election results are announced, chaos could follow. So according to the charter, they are advising what they are advising. But as you've said, if the government is proceeding, or the election authorities are proceeding and announcing the results, there are legal ways of addressing this issue, including, banning the DRC out of its membership and other sanctions. So, but we'll see if that's going to be the case.
And what exactly do we know about the credibility of that election? What information does the African Union have to make them cast aspersions on the conduct of elections in the DRC?
So before calling for the emergency meeting that we saw yesterday here, which brought together member states, heads of state from across the continent, including the SADC region, IGAD and others, the African Union has been assessing the situation on the ground using its pre-election team and those observers on the ground at the moment as well. What they have concluded is the situation is fragile already. The country's history of political transition since independence as well is not a very good track record. So the AU does not want the security situation of the country to be escalated. The evidence is simple. After the announcement was made that the person has won, there was signs of conflict in the country, which has been alarming for the African Union. It is saying that let's just give it time, let's consult each other and find a possible and peaceful solution to the existing problem. Announcing it, however, is going to affect the country more than any other time in its history. So the African Union's assessment is based on the people it has on the ground at the moment and before the elections, Beatrice.
Well, Giro, and just a quick update on exactly what the African Union is doing at the moment. Has the AU dispatched the high-level delegation to the Democratic Republic of Congo?
So, Beatrice, not yet. That's the answer. The African Union high-level delegation is expected to arrive in DR Congo as soon as possible. That's what the African Union political affairs officials are telling us at the moment. The delegation will include, by the way, the outgoing chairperson of the African Union, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, also Idris Deby from Chad, Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Congo, even Namibia's president will be included, of course, alongside the AUC chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat. The African Union is banking on this high-level delegation to convince DRC officials, including the president and the election authorities, that they come to terms and they hold the election results and not announce them, at least not now. So they are not deployed yet, but we're expecting them to have to go to Kinshasa as soon as possible, based on the words of the African Union.
Right, Girum Chala for us in Addis Ababa, the seat of the African Union. Now, in Madagascar, the island nation's transfer of power has taken place at the presidential palace in the capital, Antananarivo. Outgoing President Henry Rajoelina handed over to President Andry Rajoelina. The first presidential election was held on November the 7th last year. No candidate received a majority vote. The second round, involving the two top candidates, Andry Rajoelina and Makravola Manana, was held on the 19th of December. Rajoelina was then announced as the winner with 56% of the vote by the Malagasy electoral body. Also on matters elections, Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has issued a statement calling for presidential elections to be held on April the 18th. Local authorities will be required to review and update electoral lists from the 23rd of January to the 5th of February. President Bouteflika, however, did not mention whether he will run for a fifth term in office. The ruling parties have declared support for his re-election. Meanwhile, some opposition parties have called for the postponement of the elections for 2 years, insisting on the appointment of a transitional cabinet to enable free and fair elections. To Kenya now, and a Canadian national is among 5 suspects who have appeared before a local court on charges relating to the Tuesday terror attack in Nairobi. The rest are Kenyans. Police have applied to continue holding them in custody until investigations are complete. The case will be mentioned on the 18th of February. Security agencies have not released any information on Gulaid Abdi Hakim, apart from his Canadian nationality. Another suspect was arrested on the outskirts of the city on Friday morning. Investigations into the attack is still underway as security agencies search for the people behind the raid. 21 people were killed when militants stormed the Dusit D2 hotel situated in Nairobi's Westlands area. The siege lasted for over 11 hours. And still on that terror attack in Nairobi, Somali and Muslim businessmen from one of Nairobi's business hubs have staged a demonstration against the Somali group Al-Shabaab. Most businesses remained closed as members took to the streets to condemn the Tuesday raid on Dusit D2 hotel. At the same time, security agents and bomb experts have continued with their search for possible unexploded devices at the Dusit D2 hotel. They are also looking for any possible clues that might help in apprehending more suspects. Several grenades were detonated after being found at the scene on Thursday.
We want to tell the people of Kenya and the world that we say no to terrorism. We say no to Al-Shabaab. They don't represent us. They don't speak for us. They do not belong to they're not Muslims as far as we are concerned. They're not Somalis as far as we are concerned. They are just a bunch of murderers.
The Islamic Business Hub, led by the Islamic business community and the area leaders, have decided to close shops today in solidarity with the victims of the Riverside attack. It was a barbaric attack, and it's a condemnation of that attack.
This place, there's a Somali people, and then today there's no working for market. They're showing that they have badly for what they have done.
The Somali army has received a major boost in its fight against terrorism. The army received a fleet of armored trucks from Qatar as it plans to push out the terror group from its last remaining strongholds. Abdulaziz Bilo has more now from Mogadishu.
These armored trucks are expected to give Somali forces an upper hand in the fight against militant groups. The Qatari government donated the trucks to the Ministry of Defense as Mogadishu plans to take over security responsibility from the African Union forces next year.
We've spent a lot of time training our forces but lacked equipment and logistics to offer them. Today's donation is a positive start to empowering our national army.
Al-Shabaab has limited the movement of troops in areas outside major cities by using improvised explosive devices and other roadside bombs to destroy military convoys. In December, 2 senior army commanders were killed when a roadside bomb hit their pickup truck south of Mogadishu. Somalia says decades-long sanctions has frustrated its ability to strengthen its forces, unlike the better-paid and well-funded African Union force. Experts say IEDs inflict colossal damage on both military and civilian population. Al-Shabaab has also targeted the African Union troops using IEDs along the main supply route.
This is a threat that is here to live. This is a threat that is being effectively utilized by the enemy. And so we must go after it and defeat it. And once we defeat it, they will run out of ideas, and for the time being, before they even develop other new ones, we'll have defeated them.
Authorities have beefed up security in major Somali cities after Al-Shabaab launched a brazen attack on a high-end hotel in Nairobi. Tuesday's attack came 3 years after the group overran an army base, killing scores of Kenyan soldiers in El Ade near the border with Kenya.
It's time to eliminate the extremist group operating in the country. For long, they have inflicted pain and suffering to civilians, but we no longer tolerate them. We hope to have good news for the Somali public very soon, as we plan to wrestle control of the remaining areas it controls.
An offensive to flush out the militant group in parts of southern Somalia is already underway. Authorities here say that military operations over the years has frustrated the group's attacking capability and are now calling for more support in eliminating the Al-Qaeda-linked group that has claimed thousands of lives both at home and abroad. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Chinese President Special Envoy Yang Jiechi visits Cameroon in his continuing African tour. And demonstrators clash with police in Sudan as protests continue.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. your voice.
A top Chinese diplomat has been visiting the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. The Chinese President's Special Envoy Yang Jiechi met with President Teodoro Obiang in the capital. Yang said Beijing would work with the country to meet commitments from last year's China-Africa Cooperation Forum. President Obiang said he welcomes Chinese investment and looks forward to more cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese envoy is on a four-nation diplomatic tour. Well, from Equatorial Guinea, Yang Jiechi headed to Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé, where he's met with President Paul Biya. They are reviewing the China-Cameroon cooperation and relations over the years. The leaders will seek to strengthen their ties this year and work to accelerate Chinese-sponsored projects in Cameroon. Well, let's now go live to Cameroon, where CGTN's Penina Karibe is following the development in the capital, Yaoundé. Penina, has Mr. Yang Jiechi, though, met a Cameroonian President Paul Biya yet?
Yes, Beatrice, as we speak presently, they are holed up in a meeting. This is a very short but very intense trip for the special envoy here in Cameroon. He hit the ground running this afternoon, and just like you mentioned, they are in that meeting with President Paul Biya again. Like you said, the center stage of those talks has to do with the relationship of the two countries, China and Cameroon. These are countries that have enjoyed warm relations for the past 48 years, and China as well getting quite involved in helping Cameroon with its development agenda. So fast-tracking some of those Chinese-sponsored projects is one of the main agenda in these discussions of Beatrice. And these projects, I could say, are quite many here. And a lot of people just waiting to see what is going to be the outcome of those discussions. Now, after that, we understand there will be a dinner, including the foreign minister of the country. You will recall President Xi Jinping last year saying that China is quite committed to ensuring that Cameroon gains that security and that security and stability that it is fighting or striving for. And of course, a lot of Cameroonians saying that this is something that they also would want to see the outcomes of. And then tomorrow morning at about 9:30, the special envoy is expected to depart, Beatrice.
Penina, what are the expectations in Cameroon, though, from the visit by the Chinese president's special envoy?
Well, I would say the highest on that list, Beatrice, has to do with those projects that have an impact on people's daily lives. Take, for instance, the health sector here. It is really, it is in need, I would say, of development. And this is one area that the two countries are focusing on. Now, last year, when President Paul Biya visited China, President Xi Jinping did say that they would help Cameroon upgrade some of those hospitals, key hospitals, I should add, here in capital Yaoundé. Now, when you talk about infrastructure, again, it is underdeveloped, that sector. And this is another area we've seen China concentrating on. A lot of Chinese projects have to do with construction of roads, for instance, in the capital and even outside of Yaoundé, linking key regions to the capital city. When you talk about water, an essential commodity, there's quite a huge shortage of water in Yaoundé and its environs. And again, we're seeing the biggest project of water in the continent here in Cameroon, Beatrice. So there's a lot of expectations that there's going to be a lot more development. President Xi Jinping did say that China will respect and support the development path that Cameroon chooses. And this is something that a lot of Cameroonians, when we speak to them, Beatrice, say they're willing to see this grow because this is something that improves their lives at the end of the day. So a lot of expectations on the acceleration of the existing projects, projects that should start and haven't yet started. Hope that they are going to start sometime soon, Beatrice.
Penina Karibe for us then, Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé. A child and a doctor have been reported dead in the Sudan as anti-government protests hit their 5th week. The two deceased persons are said to have been killed by gunshot wounds to the head during the violence. Protesters clashed with Sudanese security forces in the latest riots due to unrest over price rises and cash shortages that flared a month ago. Riots have rippled across Sudan since December the 19th, and security forces have at times used live ammunition to disperse demonstrations. The official death toll stands at 24. However, Amnesty International has said that more than 40 people have been killed. President Bashir recently reiterated that the only form of changes that can take place in government is through free and fair elections, dismissing foreign influence or riots in the country. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council has criticized Sudan's security forces' response to the protests. At a Security Council meeting on the Sudan's sanctions, Britain, France and the United States raised their concerns, prompting objections from the Russian and Sudanese delegations. Our UN correspondent Li Tang reports from New York.
While the agenda of Thursday's Security Council meeting was on Sudan sanctions, December's deadly protests took much of the spotlight. Several Western members of the Council called on Sudan's government to exercise restraint, respect the rights of demonstrators and investigate the deaths of at least 24 people. The United States pressed for an investigation and accountability. The UK said the Sudanese government's use of lethal force and arbitrary detentions in response to peaceful protests is unacceptable and should stop, and that the Sudanese government's use of tear gas and violence within hospitals was appalling. Demonstrations in Sudan originally started over a government move to cut bread subsidies, but have since evolved into an anti-government protest against the rule of Omar al-Bashir. Sudan's ambassador to the United Nations, Omar Dahab Fadi Mohammed, objected to talk of the protests at the Security Council meeting on sanctions, suggesting it was off-topic. Russia agreed, adding that the demonstrations were an internal issue and not under Security Council purview. As for sanctions, the UN said the Sudanese government has continued to violate the arms embargo by transferring military equipment into Darfur without Security Council pre-approval, nor, according to the UN report, has it implemented travel bans and asset freezes on 4 sanctioned individuals. Armed groups had also violated UN sanctions per the UN assessment. Now, on the security front, there was consensus that the overall security situation has been improving, although the resurgence of clashes in Jabal Mara last year between government forces and the Sudan Liberation Army of Abdul Wahid had worsened the humanitarian situation and raised concerns about human rights abuses. Sexual violence against women factored in heavily during this Security Council session as well. The United Nations envoy for sexual violence in conflict, Pramila Patten, who recently visited Sudan, told the Council that conflict-related sexual violence remains a security challenge for women and girls. And Peru's Ambassador Gustavo Metza-Cuadra suggested that sexual violence be an independent listing criterion for sanctions as well, a move that France welcomed. Li Lingtan, CGTN, New York.
The epicenter of the current Ebola outbreak in the DR Congo is close to Uganda's border to the west. And with a lot of cross-border movements, local volunteers are playing a vital role in preventing the deadly virus from crossing into the country. CGTN's Michael Baleka spoke with the frontline workers helping the families directly at risk.
Adam Mujenyi is a volunteer with the Uganda Red Cross. He has been doing this work for more than a year. And since the outbreak of the Ebola in the DR Congo, Adam has become influential in creating awareness about the deadly disease.
We should not do self-medication at home. We go to the hospital very fast. We treat immediately. One case may affect the whole country, may affect even my family. Because, like, for example, the Ebola that was here in the 2007, just one case affected the whole district. We lost our doctors. So I said, let me intervene. Maybe my efforts may become a reason of preventing Ebola.
Adam is part of a larger group of frontline volunteers spread across the 7 most at-risk districts bordering the DR Congo. Screening people crossing into Uganda for Ebola is part of their daily routine, but also an experience.
I just chose to sacrifice my life. I chose. Because in life savings also choice. There are people who are there say, me, I cannot do with that. Red Cross, no, they do a lot of work, cannot pay, but me, my focus is saving people's lives.
I've learned to associate with people, different languages, different culture.
No cases of Ebola have been reported in Uganda yet, but the country remains on high alert with Ebola preparedness to ensure early detection and prevention. The Ebola disease has a fatality rate of up to 90% and has already claimed the lives of close to 400 people in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And these volunteers are trying to make sure it never crosses the border. However, being a volunteer comes at a cost.
We were abused. Others were saying maybe we are the ones who want to bring the disease in the community, so we had to teach them properly.
There is no doubt Ebola creates fear. The volunteers say most people here believe the disease is caused by witchcraft or a curse, and preventing its spread is at odds with many religious and cultural practices of the communities along the border. But volunteers like Adam are willing to take their lives to the front line to stop others from losing their lives altogether. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Bundibujo, Western Uganda.
In Algeria, more than 12,000 cattle are said to have died as a result of the outbreak of foot and mouth disease and small ruminant pests. The outbreak has spread to about 28 states around the country, causing markets to shut down for fear of selling infected meat.
The crisis in Algeria has been aggravated by the fact that livestock owners are still waiting for vaccines, which have been delayed until the end of the month. Fears that the epidemic will spread have increased.
We have had a lot of loss and there is a complete absence of the vaccines. What are they waiting for to deal with the situation and avoid greater losses? Will they leave us in this situation until we get sick? Where is the state? Where are the veterinarians?
Weekly markets have been closed, and this could in turn affect the prices of red meat. Spread of infection is attributed to the illegal trade in cattle, as the disease is prevalent in neighboring countries.
This is our trade and the source of our livelihood, from which we live in these remote areas. Why this hesitation with dealing with this epidemic? We cannot tolerate this situation more than this.
Algerian authorities have adopted several emergency measures to combat the situation. These include importing a large quantity of vaccines and the rapid burial of dead animals. There is also a reassurance that the Algerian state will compensate all of those affected, including those who have not secured their cattle.
The state has taken all necessary measures to cope with the situation. We will receive a first batch of vaccines by the end of January, and we're in negotiations with international laboratories. We call on the livestock breeders not to worry. Some of our teams are already in the field.
Experts confirmed that the continued spread of the disease could lead to a loss of about 400,000 jobs in 11 professions in the livestock division. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
A quick recap of those headlines for you at this hour. The Democratic Republic of Congo has rejected a demand by the African Union to delay announcing final results from its presidential election. The African Union has raised concern over the manner that the election was held and plans to dispatch a high-level delegation to find a way out of the crisis. But in a statement, DRC government spokesman Lambert Mende said he does not think anyone has the right to tell the court what to do. In Madagascar, the island nation's transfer of power has taken place at the presidential palace in the capital, Antananarivo. Outgoing president handed over to President Andry Rajoelina. Rajoelina was announced as the winner with 56% following a presidential runoff vote. In Kenya, a Canadian national is among 5 suspects who have appeared before a local court on charges relating to the Tuesday terror attack in Nairobi. The rest are Kenyan nationals. Police have applied to continue holding them in custody until investigations are over. The case will be mentioned on the 18th of February. Security agencies have not released any information on Guled Abdi Hakim apart from his Canadian nationality. And a top Chinese diplomat has been visiting the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. The Chinese President's Special Envoy Yang Jiechi met with President Teodoro Obiang in the capital. Yang said Beijing would work with the country to meet commitments from last year's China-Africa Cooperation Forum. He later met Cameroonian President Paul Biya. And that's a look at your headlines. Well, let's now go to Ramanyang for a look at the day's business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Zimbabwe's inflation rate hits 42% in December. And Safaricom's overdraft service exceeds expectations with 1 million clients in the first week of operations.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
All right, then let's start with some grim numbers coming out of Zimbabwe. Headline annual inflation over there has risen again, this time to an prices are now the most expensive in the world at over $3 a litre. On to West Africa, Nigeria's central bank says it will establish a microfinance bank, a state-owned one, to promote access to credit finance for SMEs. The governor of that central bank, Godwin Emefiele, said that the new bank will operate in 774 local government areas. Following the launch of a national financial inclusion strategy in 2012, Emefiele said that the federal government set a target to achieve a 20% financial exclusion rate in Nigeria by 2020. And the latest survey on access to financial services, about 36.8% of eligible Nigerian adults still do not have access to any sort of formal financial services. Speaking of financial services, Kenya's biggest telecommunications operator, Safaricom, has gained 1 million users for its latest financial service offering in just 8 days. The new service is called Fuliza in Swahili. It's essentially an overdraft facility that's now available on its widely used, dominant, some would say, M-Pesa platform. According to the telecommunications firm CEO Bob Collymore, Safaricom lent out $10 million in that 8-day window. M-Pesa now offers loans and savings products in conjunction with local banks, as well as merchant payment services too. Fuliza, however, is also underwritten by 2 Kenyan lenders, that's Kenya Commercial Bank and the Commercial Bank of Africa.
Turned out we got the million by day 8. And by day 8, we had lent about $10 million. Now I think we're probably at about $15 million that's been loaned out. So really exciting product, you know, quite creative. But if you look at it in the scale of things, you know, it's just like an evolution of what we've done before. But clearly it meets a very latent demand.
And for the traders among you, we'll have some analysis of Safaricom in the next hour. Let's turn to South Africa now. The rand did fall against the American dollar on Thursday after the central bank left interest rates unchanged. Stocks over there also closed lower. They were led by a slump in retailers after rather poor sales updates from Mr. Price, Woolworths and Truworths. South Africa's central bank kept its benchmark repo rate unchanged. 6.75% is the number there. The MPC said rand yields on the benchmark government bond during 2026 were up 2 basis points to 8.8%. We're still in the country. Top officials of South Africa's logistics entity Transnet have been updating investors and stakeholders about the company's financial status. The business remains under pressure with a range of legal actions underway. The company has also issued summons to former top executives who've been implicated in a broad range of financial mismanagement scandals. CGTN's Angela Coppola brings us up to speed.
Transnet got a new board in May last year. It's been a tough 7 months since, as they began uncovering a range of governance failures, fraud and corruption on a grand scale.
One would not be exaggerating if one was to say what we found in the organization was nothing short of a horror movie. Things that you thought would not happen in this country and in a state-owned company.
The board and management have indicated that a turnaround strategy will be developed, but wouldn't be drawn on a timeline.
The business community, there should be, good news. I think we are going to see a much more cooperative Transnet going forward, willing to sit down with the private sector, looking at where we can cooperate.
The business is in a tough financial position. Its debt book has ballooned to over $42 billion. Despite this, there has been some growth.
We have actually seen some growth on the revenue numbers and on our EBITDA. And we still remain, I think one of the key things is that Transnet remains a very strong cash generative unit. And in the SOCE space, I think it's still one of the lights that we keep shining and we keep focusing on to make sure that we don't want to be extending our arms to be borrowing more than we need.
Transnet are pursuing civil action in several areas, including filing papers against at least 4 ex-employees, including 2 previous CEOs, the head of procurement, and 1 divisional senior executive.
Some of the key architects of state capture had effectively turned Transnet into a piggy bank. In our view, many of these executives responsible for running Transnet went to the office every day primarily to loot.
Transnet management and the board are taking the time to look at the operations to find out how deep-rooted the corruption actually goes. They haven't got to the bottom of it yet. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Yet another large-scale infrastructure project built by a Chinese firm has come online. This time it's the Mohammed VI Bridge in Morocco's capital, Rabat. Now it's notable for being Morocco's first cable-stayed bridge. Apparently it's also the largest of its kind on the continent. It was built by the China Railway Major Bridge Engineering Group at a cost of about $32 million. The bypass is part of the North African state's 2035 road plan. The plan aims to build new roads and improve current ones in the next 25 years, with isolated rural areas being among the biggest beneficiaries. The motorway has also helped to ease up traffic in the cities of Rabat and Salé.
We Moroccans have long endured a very uncomfortable passage through Rabat. We used to spend a lot of time, which was really tiring. We have always dreamt that one day this problem can be solved. Now this wish is fulfilled. We have this bridge, which is a piece of art.
As a driver, I often travel this way. It used to be very time-consuming and very hard. Now, however, the Chinese have come here to build this bridge, the Mohammed VI Bridge. We are now able to pass this section very efficiently, saving a lot of time. I'm really happy about it.
Now, if you're a coffee addict, like I am, this next story is going to depress you. Climate change and deforestation are putting more than half of the world's wild coffee species at risk of extinction right now. According to scientists at the Royal Botanical Gardens in the UK, that includes the most common commercial coffee varieties, Arabica and Robusta. CGTN's Terry Wangari takes us through their findings.
Research published by experts at Britain's Royal Botanic Gardens found that current conservation measures for wild coffee species are not enough to protect their long-term future.
The main threat to the world's coffee species is deforestation. And that's because most coffee species actually occur in forests.
Among coffee species under threat are some that could be used to breed and develop the coffees of the future.
I think climate change is a particular concern because the species we grow occur in very narrow climatic envelopes. That means that as the climate changes, as temperatures increase and rainfall decreases, the suitable area for growing those coffee diminishes. And that translates also to the wild species, the species in Africa, Madagascar and elsewhere, is that they occur in forests. Those forests are being impacted by climate change.
The researchers, whose work was published on Wednesday in the journals Science Advances and Global Change Biology, said their findings are a concern for Ethiopia in particular. Ethiopia is the natural birthplace of wild Arabica coffee and Africa's largest coffee exporter. Around 15 million Ethiopians are involved in coffee production, and annual exports have an estimated value of $1 billion.
So you might say, so what? It's only a drink. Well, it's a pretty important drink. For producing countries, it's particularly important. So there are many tropical countries which depend on coffee for their majority or the bulk of their export earnings. It's estimated that around the world there are 100 million people producing coffee in farms around the world.
But on the flip side, the RBG team went in search of the highland coffee of Sierra Leone, fabled for its flavor in the late 19th century. They described it as lost coffee after no confirmed sightings since the 1950s. The team eventually rediscovered the plant in a highland location in good numbers and are now in the process of cultivating cuttings.
This is a long-term issue, but if we don't start thinking about it now, we don't start preserving wild species, our options in the future will rapidly diminish. And we don't want to be in the situation where we find ourselves requiring some wild plant or some wild genes, only to find that actually it's extinct in the wild.
According to the team's research, up to 60% of the land used for Ethiopia's coffee production could become unsuitable for use by the end of the century. But highland coffee in Sierra Leone could become a new crop species for the future if proper action is taken to curb climate change. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
One last story for you in this segment. Ghana's government says it is looking at ways of making the country a better, easier, more efficient place to set up and run a business. Now, those comments come after the West African gold and oil producer dropped 4 places in Forbes magazine's latest rankings of the best countries to do business in. Ghana was ranked 94th out of 161 countries. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Pitching his country to the world. For 7 years, Nicholas Bote has been providing IT solutions to companies in Ghana. He believes Ghana is perfectly placed to help his business thrive.
Ghana is a growing country, and any growing country needs technologies to grow faster. And we as a tech company, it helps us because we're getting multinational companies to come in. We have local firms that are also expanding.
However, Nicholas is worried about the burden of taxes on his growing business. Businesses pay corporate tax of around 25%. In 2017, the government abolished at least 11 taxes to promote growth in the private sector.
Ghana's political stability has made it one of the safest places to do business in Africa. Multinational companies enjoy up to 10 years of corporate tax incentives. The country has been implementing this policy for many years to attract foreign investments.
But, despite this improved business environment, Forbes ranked Ghana 4 places lower, bringing it to 94th out of 161 countries. Something the government is surprised about.
We would wonder why on the Forbes we would either drop from 90 to 94th position, particularly when you've had a lot more improvement in the macroeconomy.
The government is reviewing its policies in hopes of pushing Ghana into the top 20 countries.
We are aggressively looking at expanding our infrastructure because it's critical in moving our economy from one that was predicated on the export of raw materials and resources to one in which you're adding value. And if you look at some of our policies that we've actually initiated, like the One District, One Factory, it's the first stepping stone to industrializing a nation.
World Bank data shows Ghana is doing well in West Africa when it comes to the ease of doing business. But some business analysts say more still needs to be done.
Look at indicators like interest rates. The pricing on the cost of doing business is still high. If interest rates are still in the double digits beyond 20, it's way high. Inflation should come to as low as 6, 7. We should be able to strive for that. And so for us to get to the point where we are ranking below 50, we may have to be a little more aggressive on our macroeconomics.
So this one will replace.
Over the last few years, Ghana's currency has depreciated, making it more expensive for Nicholas to do business internationally. He hopes for a turnaround this year to allow his company to flourish. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
We'll leave it there for the time being. Here's what's coming up though at the top of the hour. We'll be looking at Zimbabwe's crisis in a bit more detail. The government over there, as you're well aware, has basically shut down all internet access in the country. We'll also be examining the economic crisis in a lot more detail from 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, though, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We'll be telling you how South Africa's economic hub, Gauteng, is dealing with teenage pregnancies. Stay with us.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Africa's economic hub, Gauteng, is struggling to deal with the issue of teenage pregnancies at schools. The pregnancy rate among girls aged between 10 to 19 years old is high and frustrating to officials. As a result, the province has undertaken to prioritize this issue. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela.
Gauteng Health Departmental Leader Dr. Gwen Ramahope swooped in the early hours of the morning at Kalafong Hospital in Pretoria to monitor service delivery at the facility. This surprise visit is part of creating awareness around the high teenage pregnancy in this economic province. Gauteng province has noted an exceedingly high number of young girls who deliver babies in clinics and hospitals. Dr. Ramohopa wants to ensure that the health facilities such as this one are able to deal with the sensitive matter of pregnant children. From here on, Dr. Ramohopa visited a number of primary schools as part of school health and teenage learner pregnancy program.
A significant number of maternal deaths in South Africa comes from teenagers, as their bodies are simply not yet ready for babies.
Pregnancy of a young person, especially teenagers and children, can be life-threatening for them and the baby. So it is the body is not really ready for the pregnancy. And we get very worried as a health sector. I classify that as a high-risk situation.
According to provincial health authorities, there's also a high number of choice termination of pregnancies performed on the same age group.
Our constitution accords everyone the rights to health, but also right to reproductive health. So working with schools, our school health program also has a lot of education around reproductive health to prevent pregnancies, to also understand the risk factors.
As part of the campaign against teenage pregnancies, Gauteng Health Department has launched a health, wellness and happiness campaign to prioritize school health programs. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Cameroon has over the years enjoyed warm relations with China, and the influence of the two countries on each other is now becoming evident. The Cameroonian government has rolled out a curriculum to teach Mandarin in public schools. And as CGTN's Penina Karibe found out, the interest in this language is quite big. Take a look.
A lively debate going on about the merits of rural versus urban life, a timely topic in a continent currently experiencing an explosion of rural-urban migration. One by one, the students stand while articulating their points on their choice, not in English or French, but in Chinese. The government bilingual high school Yaoundé, or simply GBHAs as it's locally known, is one of the public schools in Cameroon that is teaching Chinese as part of their curriculum. It is an initiative started by the government a few years ago and is a reflection of the growing ties between Cameroon and China.
As you can see in Cameroon, there are a lot of Chinese and Chinese companies that are helping us put up infrastructure in the country, and as a result, the students here see a lot of opportunities. So they know if they learn Chinese now, it will help them in future.
Initially, it was difficult getting students to enroll for the classes, but with time, more people appreciated its importance.
I think it's important for me because it's one of the languages that are most spoken in the world. So I think wherever I can go, I can speak Chinese and I'm going to communicate very well.
It is important because Cameroon has good relations with China, and I'd like this relationship to grow so that when we learn Chinese, I can work as an interpreter. Learning Chinese will help enhance economic cooperation between Cameroon and China.
Its popularity has increased over the years to a point the school has started weekend lessons for parents and other teachers willing to learn the basics of Mandarin. The students also participate in an annual contest where the winner gets a scholarship to further their studies in China. It's not every day you walk into a school in Africa and find a class ongoing in Chinese. But here in Cameroon, this is an initiative that is well off the ground. And for these students, the sky is the limit.
My ambition in life is to become an international doctor.
But the school is also facing some challenges.
Right now you can see the students are interested in learning Mandarin, but they don't have enough textbooks. And as you can see, the condition of the school, we don't have power. We also wish we could have a library and get more textbooks and other facilities.
And despite the challenges, the zeal and enthusiasm of the students to succeed is evident. Penina Karibe, CGTN, in Yaoundé, Cameroon.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead.